So, as many of you know, we've been having some great apologetics sessions so far. We've covered topics including, do you have to take the Bible literally? The dark side of Catholic history, how to use the Catechism, and the next session coming up, not this week but the following one, by popular demand is going to be, if you are in China, can you use rice instead of bread when you celebrate the Eucharist? The answer for the record is no, but why not? That's the interesting question. In other words, a discussion about how much Christianity can and should and shouldn't adapt to local cultures, which is very topical at the moment. But one of the biggest questions that always comes up each year in apologetics is this. We believe that Jesus Christ is the Saviour, as Christians, as Catholics, and that baptism is the gateway to salvation. But what happens to all those people who do not know Jesus Christ? Put another way, can someone be blamed for not being a Christian, especially if they're brought up in a non-Christian culture, or, for argument's sake, a post-Christian culture like our own? So you can imagine my first answer is always, well, I never judge anyone. I don't know what's in their hearts, in their conscience. Second answer, a bit more theological, is, of course, you can't blame someone for what they don't know, usually. God loves everyone, always. God gives everyone the opportunity to be saved. And you can't blame someone for their ignorance of Christ if they've never known him. Okay? Just hold that as far as it goes. But, hang on, there's a little bit more to say. Because what if some people, perhaps many, have had the opportunity to learn about Christ, about God, to go deeper, to explore and search and find, but they didn't take that opportunity. They chose not to follow the lead and to follow that opportunity. What about them? What if there was an obstacle to faith that could have been overcome, but someone chose not to? It makes it a bit more interesting, doesn't it? And again, it's not that I'm judging anyone here, not at all. I'm just saying it's often more complex than we think. And the deeper reasons why someone believes or doesn't believe or half believes are often quite subtle and complicated. This is what the gospel story today is about. We've heard about Zacchaeus, a tax collector, a wealthy man who did not know Jesus Christ. Right? He's a complete outsider. He's not a disciple or a follower. But he's heard about him. He's heard, and something in him is anxious to see. He's a short man. He couldn't see for the crowds. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus. And because of that searching and running and climbing and looking, he enters into a conversation with Jesus, who stays at his house and brings salvation to Zacchaeus and his household. Do you see the symbolism here and how it applies to our theology and our apologetics? Zacchaeus heard about Jesus. Well, I would guess that nearly everyone in this country, this post-Christian country, has at least heard about Jesus. But Zacchaeus could have stayed at home, like so many others in Jericho must have done. He could have ignored that little bit of curiosity that was in his heart, that inner voice. And then, when he's out in the streets now, Zacchaeus can't see. He's too short. He could have given up so easily. Those other people at the front, the people who got there first, it seems impossible to get closer to Jesus because of his height. There is an obstacle, basically. It could be anything. But Zacchaeus, unlike so many others, overcomes the obstacle. He doesn't just climb a tree, a random tree. He runs ahead to the place where Jesus will be passing. Sorry for my 1970s computer references here. It's like when you play Space Invaders and you have to fire the rocket ahead of where the alien's going to be, don't you? Or in clay pigeon shooting, you can't shoot at the target, you shoot at where the target is going to be. Zacchaeus, to see Jesus, needed to be practical, pragmatic, strategic. And then, when the real conversation with Jesus begins, instead of running away from the implications, he welcomes him into his home and radically changes his life. I mean radically. He gave away 50% of his property, of his assets, to the poor, and promised, if he cheated anyone, to pay back fourfold what he'd taken. Can you imagine having a moment where you think, I'm going to give away now 50% of my assets, my income, my bank account, my student grant, on the spot here? This is pretty radical. This is the point. Salvation comes to Zacchaeus and his household not just because passively he happened to live in a Christian country or passively he happened to grow up Christian. It comes to him because of all this curiosity and responding and planning and perseverance and willingness to change. This is a great, great theme in the Bible. Our search for God. Moses seeking the face of God on the mountain, the Jewish people seeking the promised land, is epitomised by the poetry of the Song of Songs, where the two lovers are searching for each other over the mountains. I sought him, but could not find him. At last I found him. It's a great theme of Christian spiritual writing throughout the ages, especially in the mystical poetry of St. John of the Cross. The search for God. Jesus is encouraging us to search more, to seek more. Ask, he says, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened. These words of Jesus, it's a promise, a great relief, a consolation. Yes, if I keep looking, I'm going to find. But it's also a challenge. Have you sought, like Jesus says, like Zacchaeus did? Or are you stuck at home while Jesus is passing by in the streets? Or are you at the back of the crowd, hiding, when he wants to speak to you personally? I want to connect this just with the beautiful tradition in Christian prayer of night prayer at the end of the day, which is so important. And what's traditionally called the examination of conscience, but maybe better, is called an examination of consciousness, or in the Jesuit tradition, just the examen. The examen. It just means, very simply, to have 2 or 3 minutes at the end of your day, seeing what has happened, replaying it, like the video assistant referee in the football match, yes? Looking back, seeing what you have missed. At the end of the day, just a few moments to ask, what do I want to give thanks for today? What do I need to pray for? Who do I need to pray for? What do I need to say sorry for? How was God present with me today? He was, but did I miss him? How was he speaking to me today? He was, but did I hear him? We're looking for clues. We know that God has been present, that he's been inviting us through events, through the conversations we've had, through my conscience, his hidden presence. I encourage you, if you've never done it before, don't make it some big complicated thing, but just night prayer, 2 or 3 minutes to pause and look at the day and ask 1 or 2 questions to see where God was. I've just finished the final season of The Good Wife. Yeah, all 7 seasons. It's taken me about a year and a half of DVDs. A fantastic Chicago political legal drama. But while the lawyers are doing their lawyering, lots of you lawyers here, lots of talk and clever words and blah blah blah, yeah, it's Kalinda Sharma who is getting things solved. She's the investigator at the law firm. She's sent out by the lawyers to do the dirty work, to roll up her sleeves, to go back to the scene of the crime and see what the police missed, to find that forgotten witness and interview them, to hunt out the hidden tape and listen to the footsteps in the background sound that the first investigators had missed. Sometimes in our faith we can be a bit passive. We can keep things ticking over as if God has said everything he wants to say and we've just got to get on with it. But he's speaking to us each day, inviting us to know him better and to know him more. We have to be like Kalinda. We have to be saints. The party on Friday night, the All Saints party, it was a bit of fun. Some crazy costumes. Somehow we had 73 nuns from every religious order in creation down in the bar last night on Friday. We had a lion and a leopard. I wasn't quite sure how they were saints, but I think there was a saints connection. We had a king, we had a headless St. Denis, we had St. Veronica with her veil, we had St. Peter Martyr with an axe sticking out of his head. At first I was very impressed by the devotion of this particular student to this great Dominican saint. But then I realised he only came with an axe in his head because he was going to a Halloween party later on. So we're called to be saints. Like Zacchaeus. Not half saints, or could have been saints, if only we'd have noticed and listened more. It's an invitation to radical change. Cardinal Newman said, and it was quoted in the exhibition we had, quote, "Most people desire not to please God, but to please themselves without displeasing God." I'll say that again. Most people desire not to please God, but to please themselves without displeasing God. Zacchaeus had a moment of conversion and really chose to try to please God, actively seeking him and his will instead of skirting round it. I'll leave you with one final image. I'm glad they're not here this morning, are they? Is Leela and Davide here? Okay, they're not. I can speak about them. So, the beautiful wedding that we had 2 weeks ago of Leela and Davide at the Oratory Church, a lovely, lovely day. And I'm not telling you secrets now from marriage preparation. I'm telling you what he said in his best man speech. Davide told the story of when they first met. And he said, "Isn't it interesting? I remember the first meeting, but she doesn't." He said they first met in a lift when they were working together in the same company. He spotted her, but she didn't notice him, and she doesn't even remember meeting him that first time. So Davide saw this woman in the lift, Leela, and he went into action. He made a strategic plan with stealth and cunning and blood, sweat and tears. As a lawyer in the company, he's the banker and she's the lawyer, he assigned her extra legal work so she would have to report to him. There were weeks of cups of tea asking how her work was developing. Davide's friends were very confused because he'd taken this peculiar interest in obscure aspects of commercial law all of a sudden. And the rest is history. It could have been a passing look in a lift. It could have been a passing look in a lift. Instead, it led to love and this beautiful marriage, but only because they were willing to take it further and not leave it to chance. It's very biblical. It echoes the Song of Songs, the lovers pursuing each other. It echoes Zacchaeus climbing the tree to see and to hear. It's the same for us. We have to ask and seek and knock. There is more out there than we imagine. God is more interesting, more beautiful, more challenging. Life is an incredible adventure. The tragedy, if we only skim over the surface, miss the clues, the signs, and don't really listen. Remember the promise of Jesus. The one who searches finds. The one who knocks will have the door opened.